Welcome back, beauties. In today's story, a heartbroken message intended for an ex-boyfriend ends up in the hands of a ruthless Korean crime lord. What begins as a simple mistake transforms into dangerous destiny when he appears at her apartment with a Mercedes and an offer that will change her world forever. Will this enigmatic stranger become her savior or her downfall? If you crave intense romance with a perilous twist, buckle up. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell because this story is about to get absolutely insane. Let's dive in. A message typed through tears. A number misdialed in desperation. When Zara's raw confession reaches Minjun, a lethal Korean syndicate air-cloaked in Armani and buried secrets, her simple existence shatters into beautiful chaos. He materializes at her threshold with coal-black eyes, a crimson orchid, and a proposition that should send her running, but instead ignites something she believed had died 6 months ago. Now she stands between fleeing for survival and surrendering to a man who might rescue her or completely destroy her. The words glowed on Zara's phone like an open wound she couldn't seal. "I'm falling apart tonight. Please come hold me until I remember what being desired feels like. Touch me until dawn breaks, and I can pretend this loneliness isn't killing me." Her fingers had trembled violently when she hit send. She'd intended it for Marcus, the man who'd shattered her heart like porcelain half a year earlier. But through her fog of tears and tequila, her thumb had slipped. Wrong contact, wrong number. The message was out there now, permanent, mocking her from the read receipt. 18 minutes later, someone rapped on her door. Firm, purposeful, authoritative. Zara's heart plummeted. Fear flooded her system like ice water. She forced her legs toward the entrance, each footfall heavier than the previous one, her brain screaming warnings. When she yanked it open, the man before her stole every molecule of oxygen from her chest. Korean, impossibly beautiful. Ink snaked up from his collar, intricate designs vanishing beneath the expensive weave of his midnight suit. His physique consumed her doorway like he'd been sculpted from darkness and granite. Obsidian eyes examined her with a focus that weakened her knees. Behind him, a silver Mercedes purred at the curb, its engine a low rumble slicing through the Seoul night like a beast's growl. "Zara," he said, and his voice was silk wrapped around steel, smooth enough to seduce, lethal enough to wound. "You reached out for someone tonight." She stood paralyzed, voiceless. She had never encountered this man before in her existence. Hours earlier, Halloween had drenched Seoul in madness and magic. The avenues had overflowed with celebration, couples in intricate disguises, kids clutching plastic pumpkins brimming with treats. But none of it had touched Zara. She'd spent her shift sanitizing the modest hair studio where she earned her living, the acrid smell of relaxers stinging her nostrils. Her co-workers had pleaded with her to join their party plans, but she'd managed that exhausted smile and declined. Festivities felt hollow when her soul was still bleeding. In her tiny studio apartment, she'd crumpled onto her second-hand futon, studying the fractures spreading across her plaster ceiling. Seoul thrummed beyond her window, electric and uncaring. Her mind kept circling back to Marcus, how he'd made her feel visible in this enormous foreign metropolis, how he'd murmured promises against her skin, how he'd disappeared without explanation once the excitement faded. She'd been his curiosity, another black woman for a wealthy Korean man to experience and abandon when the thrill diminished. But the yearning hadn't diminished. The need clawed at her ribs until breathing became impossible. She'd seized her phone, located his name, and let the words hemorrhage out. "I don't want your apologies anymore. I don't care how deeply you wounded me. I just need your embrace one final time. I need you to love me the way I'm still foolish enough to love you." Her vision had blurred with moisture. She continued typing, reckless, drowning. "Tonight, I need you against me until I forget my own name. Make love to me until this void finally stops screaming." She'd pressed send before bravery could desert her. Then she'd pressed her face into her cushion and waited for humiliation to consume her. Instead, she received a knock. Now she faced a stranger who studied her like he could decipher every wound carved into her spirit. His expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't entertained. It was something different entirely, something that made her stomach flip dangerously. "You didn't intend to send that to me," he said, and something resembling warmth touched his mouth. "Did you?" Her lips parted. Nothing emerged. She shook her head faintly. "I think there's been some sort of error," she managed. "Errors," he said deliberately, "are frequently the most honest things we ever commit." Her heartbeat thundered between her temples. "Who are you?" "Someone who received your truth," he said evenly. "And someone who understands exactly what that species of loneliness feels like." Zara glanced beyond him at the Mercedes, so violently misplaced before her rundown building. Everything about this man was misplaced in her small, forgotten life. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing," he said. Then something fractured behind his gaze, something wounded. "Your message reminded me of someone I buried. My mother. She used to compose letters like that, pleading for affection from a man who only understood cruelty. When she passed, I swore an oath. No woman should ever feel that erased, not while I draw breath." Zara's throat constricted. The silence stretching between them felt crushing. He reached inside his jacket and withdrew a key, offering it toward her. "I don't know you," he said softly. "But I know this. A woman who writes those words deserves to be treasured. Take the car. Drive it anywhere you desire. Keep it. Consider it payment for reminding me why humanity still matters." She stared at the key like it might detonate. I can't take that." "You already gave me something," he said, his tone dropping deeper. "You reminded me of that oath. That's worth infinitely more than any vehicle." Her pulse hammered against her sternum like it was a tempting escape. She wanted to slam the door, wanted to scream, wanted to vanish. But another fragment of her, a piece she didn't recognize and didn't trust, wanted to reach forward, wanted to beg him to remain, because something about this dangerous, impossible stranger made the emptiness feel smaller, and that frightened her more than anything else possibly could. Minjun stood beside the Mercedes, bitter wind cutting through his layers. Neon washed across the damaged pavement in rivers of violet and amber, but his focus wasn't on Seoul. It was on the message still illuminated on his screen. "I'm falling apart tonight. Please come hold me until I remember what being desired feels like. Touch me until dawn breaks, and I can pretend this loneliness isn't killing me." The text had materialized without warning, penetrating his evening like a blade through satin. Initially, he'd suspected a setup. Women didn't message him like that. When individuals contacted Minjun, it involved transactions, intimidation, survival. But this message was exposed, undefended, a woman pouring her essence into emptiness and praying someone would intercept it. For a man like him, a man who existed in violence and shadows, it was disarming, nearly fatal. He closed his eyes and remembered his mother. She used to compose letters too, correspondence never intended for delivery, concealed in the depths of her wardrobe beneath designer scarves. Minjun had discovered them at age 11, words begging for gentleness, begging for rescue from a spouse who viewed her as ornament, nothing beyond. By the time she died, those letters were all that survived of her hope. Now, absorbing this stranger's message, Minjun felt something awaken inside him that he'd assumed was extinct, a compulsion to shield someone vulnerable before existence shattered them the way it had shattered his mother. Inside the apartment, Zara perched on the edge of her mattress, hands quaking. She couldn't stop contemplating him. The tattoos, the suit, the way his eyes had penetrated her like he knew every secret she'd ever concealed. "Why did he come here?" she whispered to the vacant room. "How did I even send it to him?" She lifted her phone, examining the contact. The number was so similar to Marcus's, just one digit different. Her stomach plunged. One microscopic mistake had delivered a stranger to her doorstep. Not just any stranger, a dangerous man. Every instinct screamed at her to block him, erase everything, pretend this catastrophe never occurred. But her hands wouldn't cooperate because beneath the terror, there was something else, hunger. Minjun didn't depart. He wasn't the variety to retreat once something captured his focus. Instead, he remained in his car, scrolling through the message, absorbing each phrase again as if attempting to decode the woman behind the desperation. I just need your embrace one final time. I need you to love me the way I'm still foolish enough to love you. He exhaled gradually, fingers tightening on the leather wheel. Why did it matter? He didn't know her. He wasn't supposed to care. Yet every sentence resonated inside him, tugging at something that had been dormant for years. His phone vibrated, a text from one of his soldiers. Boss, we're prepared. The merchandise is waiting. Minjun dismissed it. For once, business could wait. Instead, he composed a message, his fingers wavering over the display. He was accustomed to delivering commands, issuing warnings, dominating situations, not this. Finally, he transmitted it. You don't strike me as someone who should be isolated tonight. The vibration of her phone made Zara startle. She grabbed for it, anticipating Marcus, or perhaps a cruel prank. But when she absorbed the words, her breathing halted. She gazed at the message. Should she respond? Every survival mechanism warned her this was insanity. She didn't even know his name. And yet, she couldn't restrain herself. I didn't mean to send that to you. It was an accident. His response materialized almost immediately. Perhaps, but accidents can expose the realities we're too terrified to voice. Her hands trembled. She typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she transmitted. You don't know me. You don't know what I've survived. His reply arrived seconds afterward. Then tell me. I'm listening. That night, their exchange extended longer than she ever planned. Initially, she maintained her words brief, guarded, but gradually, without awareness, Zara began sharing fragments of herself, her existence as a stylist in Seoul, how she'd arrived with aspirations of constructing something meaningful only to discover herself imprisoned in fatigue and isolation, how romance had been nothing except devastation, men who exploited her, fetishized her, and abandoned her with nothing except scars. He didn't interrupt, didn't seduce. He simply listened. When she finally questioned, "Why do you even care?" his answer was quiet but weighted. Because once I observed a woman I cherished weep herself unconscious every night, and nobody listened to her, not even me. I won't repeat that error. Her throat tightened. Whoever this man was, there was anguish in him too. She wanted to question who he genuinely was, but before she could, another knock resonated at her door. This time, gentler, more patient. Her breath seized. She peered through the peephole, and there he stood again, Minjun. But now in his grasp, he wasn't holding car keys. He was holding something different, a single blood-red orchid. When she finally opened the door, his gaze connected with hers, steady and impenetrable. You told me you needed someone to hold you tonight, he said quietly. I don't know if I can be that person, but I can sit here, outside your door, so you don't feel so alone. Zara's chest ached. No man had ever spoken something like that to her, not in Seoul, not anywhere. And as she closed her door softly, sliding down to the floor with tears streaming down her face, she realized one thing. Whoever the stranger was, he wasn't just dangerous. He was the most dangerous variety of man, the kind who could demolish every barrier she'd constructed to protect herself. And for the first time, she wasn't certain if she wanted to prevent him. Zara couldn't stop staring at the elegant Mercedes stationed outside her building. The engine's purr still reverberated in her consciousness, impossibly thunderous in the hushed street. Her hands shook as she clutched the key he'd abandoned, smooth, frigid, impossibly weighty in her palm. She pressed the button, and the car's lights flickered in acknowledgement. Her breath stuttered. How did this happen? She whispered. One incorrect number had led to this. A man she didn't know, dangerous and magnetic, now possessed her address, understood her loneliness, and cared enough to materialize. Minutes prior, she'd been coiled up on her mattress, attempting to comprehend it all. Her phone still buzzed with brief messages from Minjun. You don't have to communicate with me if you don't wish to, but I'll be here. I'll watch over you. Her heart pounded in ways she couldn't identify, fear, fascination, and something else, something that had nothing to do with security. Minjun stood several meters away, leaning against a street lamp. Tattoos emerged from under his suit sleeves, the nocturnal wind disturbing his dark hair. His eyes traced her through the window, not menacing, but in a way that made her chest constrict. She wanted to contact authorities, secure the door, command him to leave. But every instinct that had preserved her before felt useless now. When she finally stepped outside, cautious and trembling, he straightened. His voice was calm, controlled, even with that underlying edge she couldn't disregard. "Zara," he said simply, not a query, a declaration. "I hope I didn't alarm you." "You didn't." She paused, attempting to breathe, bewildered. He smiled faintly, a dangerous curve of lips that somehow felt protective. "Good. Bewilderment is the foundation of comprehension, and tonight you require comprehension." Her chest fluttered. "I don't know who you are." His eyes softened momentarily, almost apologetic. "Soon you'll understand me better than anyone ever has." Over the following days, Minjun began materializing in subtle ways, not invasive, not overpowering, but impossible to disregard. A latte outside her salon abandoned anonymously on her workstation with a note, "For your exhausting days, Minjun." A bouquet of blood-red orchids at her doorstep, no words, just a presence she couldn't rationalize. Zara's curiosity blazed alongside her fear. She couldn't deny the strange electricity that coursed through her whenever she spotted him from her window. And yet the thought of who he genuinely was, a man she didn't know, a man with shadows she couldn't perceive, terrified her. One evening, he materialized as she secured the salon, leaning casually against his Mercedes, observing her with those unreadable eyes. "You labor too intensely," he said quietly. "You deserve more than this existence of perpetual exhaustion." She blinked. "Who are you really?" "Someone who comprehends what it's like to be trapped in a reality that doesn't acknowledge you." Her stomach twisted. The pain in his voice mirrored her own loneliness, yet it carried a gravity she didn't understand. She wanted to probe further, but words abandoned her. He didn't push. He simply handed her another blood-red orchid and departed, the engine of his Mercedes dissolving into the night. Later, sitting on her mattress, Zara held the flower, inhaling its delicate fragrance. Her mind raced. Every encounter with him pulled at something inside her, fear, yearning, curiosity, something dangerously like attraction. She reflected on the wrong number, the text, the confession she'd transmitted that led to this. How had one small mistake delivered a man like this into her existence? And more critically, why did it feel like he belonged there? By the weekend, she began noticing murmurs on the street, shopkeepers, neighbors, strangers passing by, glancing at the Mercedes and conversing in hushed tones. Minjun's presence was not undetected. Fear and curiosity mingled in her chest. She wanted to flee. She wanted to hide. But every time she attempted to push the thought of him away, she discovered herself thinking of his voice, his eyes, the strange tranquility he radiated, even when danger seemed proximate. For the first time in months, she wondered if loneliness could be something more, something that drew her toward him, even if danger lurked beneath. And in that quiet, uneasy tension, Zara realized something terrifying and thrilling simultaneously. She wanted to encounter him again. The morning sunlight cascaded softly across Zara's apartment, catching the petals of the blood-red orchid Minjun had abandoned on her nightstand the previous night. She stared at it, fingers tracing the delicate edges, heart pounding uncontrollably. It had been days since that initial knock, days since he'd materialized outside her salon, leaning against his Mercedes with those impenetrable eyes. And yet the memory of him, dangerous, handsome, commanding, haunted her in the silent moments. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. A message from him. "Meet me at 8 tonight. I want to reveal something to you." The words were simple, direct, terrifying. Her first instinct was to dismiss it. Her second was to delete it, but her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. Curiosity, desire, and a strange sense of fate battled within her. Finally, she typed, "Where?" "End Seoul Tower. Be there." The hours crawled. Zara attempted to occupy herself at the salon, but her hands shook as she worked on hair and cosmetics. Every knock on the door, every sound outside made her heart leap. What variety of man was this? Why was he doing this for her? By 7:30, she was dressed and prepared. She'd selected a simple wine-colored dress that embraced her curves in all the perfect places, her natural hair styled in flawless coils framing her face. She attempted to appear composed, but inside her heart raced with nervous anticipation. Seoul Tower loomed in the distance as she arrived. The city lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across velvet. And there, leaning against a sleek black vehicle at the base of the tower, was Min-jun, tattoos visible beneath the rolled-up sleeves of his crisp black shirt, tailored trousers, polished shoes. Every inch of him screamed authority and danger. Yet there's a gentleness in his eyes when they met hers. "You came," he said simply. Zara swallowed hard. "I didn't know what to anticipate." "Anticipate nothing," he replied, his lips curling in that faint smile that made her pulse race. "Tonight you'll witness only what I want you to witness." They rode the elevator up to the observation platform. The city sprawled beneath them, alive and glittering. He stood close, but not excessively close, just near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, attempting to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her curiosity. He remained silent momentarily, eyes fixed on the skyline. "Because you deserve to be acknowledged," he said finally. "You compose words like someone who's been invisible too long. I can't permit that." Dara felt her chest tighten. No man had ever spoken to her like that. No man had ever made her feel simultaneously so insignificant and so noticed. He handed her a small box. Confused, she opened it to discover a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny star. "For you," he said simply. "A reminder that even in darkness, you still shine." Her hands shook as she fastened it around her wrist. "Why are you so generous?" she whispered. "Because generosity is a luxury most individuals can't afford," he said, eyes glinting. "And I can." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and intimate. She wanted to speak, to ask questions about who he genuinely was, but fear tangled with desire, leaving her tongue tied. Then, unexpectedly, he took her hand, not a harsh grip, not a claim, but a careful, gentle hold that made her pulse spike. "You're not afraid?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Afraid of what?" he countered, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Of you," she admitted softly. Min-jun's smile was almost imperceptible, but it reached his eyes. "Good," he said. "You should be." They walked to the edge of the platform, the wind whipping through her coils, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She could feel the tension coiling around him, the danger that radiated from every line of his body, and yet the warmth of his hand anchored her. "You shouldn't trust me," he said quietly. "I'm not the variety of man anyone should fall for." Zara's heart stuttered. "Then why am I not scared?" "Because you recognize something I don't tell anyone," he murmured. "You see through the facades, and you make me want to be superior to the man the world thinks I am." Her breath caught. His words struck her like lightning, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. This dangerous, untouchable man was vulnerable before her. As the night deepened, they spoke, not about transactions, not about the world outside, but about existence, loss, loneliness. Min-jun told her fragments of his past, carefully, selectively, about his mother, about the pain of developing under a father who had no affection to offer, about the emptiness he'd learned to carry like armor. Zara shared pieces of her own existence, the heartbreaks, the loneliness in a foreign metropolis, the men who'd exploited her for curiosity or entertainment. And as they conversed, the distance between them diminished. When the city clock struck 11, Min-jun finally broke the silence. "I want to take you somewhere else, a quiet place where nobody can judge you, where you can be yourself." Her pulse raced. "And if I refuse?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Then I'll wait. But I hope you won't." By the end of the night, Zara realized she'd forgotten everything else, the loneliness, the heartbreak, the pain that had haunted her for months. In its place, there was this strange, terrifying, exhilarating sensation. She was falling for a man she barely knew, a man who could destroy her with a whisper, yet had chosen instead to show her kindness, attention, and something else, something dangerous and yet intoxicating. The drive home was quiet. Minjun didn't speak much, letting her thoughts roam, letting the city lights blur past them. And when he dropped her off, he didn't kiss her, didn't even linger, but his hand brushed hers for a fleeting second, sending shivers down her spine. "Good night, Zara," he said finally. "Good night," she whispered, barely breathing. After he departed, she sat on her mattress, staring at the silver bracelet on her wrist. Her heart still raced, her mind still whirled, and deep down she knew something undeniable had commenced tonight, a connection forged in loneliness, curiosity, and an inexplicable pull toward a man who is dangerous and unforgettable. And somehow she didn't want it to end. Zara hadn't slept all night. The memory of Minjun's hand brushing hers in the Mercedes, the weight of his gaze, the way his voice had spoken to her as if reading her soul, it replayed endlessly in her mind. Her small apartment felt suffocating now, too silent, too vacant. For the first time in months, she felt alive and terrified simultaneously. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Minjun. "Meet me at the Han River Pier at 8. Don't be late." She hesitated. Fear warred with curiosity. She didn't know what awaited her, what variety of man truly existed behind the cold, charming facade. And yet, something inside her, a spark she hadn't felt in years, pushed her forward. By 8 o'clock, Zara stood at the pier, the city lights reflecting on the river like liquid gold. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of the river mixed with the distant aroma of street food. And there he was, waiting as always, leaning casually against a sleek black vehicle that gleamed under the lamplight. "Punctual," he said simply, his eyes scanning her face, as if noting every detail. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know what this is," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Minjun stepped closer, not excessively close, just enough to make her pulse race. "Neither do I," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "But I want you to witness something that matters to me." Curiosity surged, overriding her fear. "What is it?" He smiled faintly and opened the car door for her. The interior smelled of leather and cologne. "Trust me," he said. They drove through the city, lights blurring past the windows. Finally, they arrived at a massive private estate hidden behind high walls and guards. Zara's heart stuttered. "This is," she began, but words failed her. "This is where I exist," he said simply. "I don't usually bring individuals here, but you deserve to witness me fully, not just glimpses." The estate was lavish, understated, yet intimidating, marble floors, modern furniture, subtle artwork, and the faint hum of security cameras, a world she could never have imagined. Zara's pulse raced. The danger she'd felt outside her apartment seemed magnified tenfold here, but mingled with it was an undeniable thrill. Minjun guided her to a balcony overlooking a private courtyard. The moonlight spilled across the space, casting long shadows. He leaned against the railing, observing her with those inscrutable eyes. "You're scared," he said quietly, almost as if reading her mind. "I shouldn't be here," she admitted softly. "I don't belong in this world." He smiled, a slow, teasing curl of lips that made her chest tighten. "Nobody belongs in my world," he said. "But tonight, I want you to belong somewhere here with me, even if just for a moment."
Her throat went dry.
She wanted to speak, to ask the questions that screamed in her mind. Who is he really? How did he find me? Why me? But the words caught in her chest. Instead, she nodded. Dinner was served in a private chamber, soft candlelight flickering against walls lined with books and artwork. The food was exquisite, flavors delicate yet bold. Zara ate slowly, savoring each bite as if tasting a dream. "You eat too quickly sometimes," Minjun remarked casually, eyes observing her. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Everything about this, about you, is so overwhelming." He chuckled softly, a rare low sound that seemed almost gentle. "Good," he said. "I want a night to overwhelm you in a positive way." She felt her face heat, and for a moment she imagined what that could signify, not just the food, the estate, or the city view, but him, the dangerous pull he carried. After dinner, Minjun led her to a small library. The room smelled faintly of aged leather and cedarwood. He gestured to a chair by the fireplace. "Sit," he said. She did, heart racing. He perched on the edge of the table opposite her, leaning forward. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the tattoos curling up his neck, the dark depth of his eyes. "I've never encountered anyone like you," he said quietly. "You're fearless even in your fear, honest even in your pain, and despite everything, you still reach for connection. That's rare." Her chest tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied. "Just listen." For hours, they conversed about existence, about loneliness, about love and loss. Minjun shared glimpses of the man he'd become, the walls he'd constructed around himself, the people he'd lost, the darkness he'd embraced. And Zara, in turn, shared the heartbreaks she'd endured in Seoul, the men who'd used her, and the emptiness she'd carried since arriving. Every word drew them closer. Every glance tightened the invisible thread binding them. She felt safe and terrified all at once, caught between fascination and fear. Finally, Minjun rose and approached her, slow, deliberate. He extended a hand. "Dance with me," he said quietly. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I'll guide you," he said simply and took her hands in his. The first notes of soft jazz began to play from a small speaker, filling the room. And as they moved together, hesitant at first, then gradually more fluidly, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in years: warmth, safety, and belonging. He didn't attempt to kiss her. He didn't attempt to claim her. He simply held her, guiding her in the dance, letting her lean against him, letting her feel desired without pressure. When the music ended, he stepped back slightly, still holding her gaze. "You're extraordinary," he said softly, "and I want to understand every part of you. But I won't rush, not now, not ever." Her throat went dry. She nodded, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, the weight of his presence. She wanted to speak, to tell him how she felt, but fear and awe kept her silent. "Tonight," he said quietly, "is only the beginning. Remember that." And with that, he led her back to the car, silent but close, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting electric touch. Back in her apartment later, Zara lay awake, the silver moonlight spilling across her mattress. Her thoughts spun endlessly about the estate, the firelit library, the dance, and the pull of a man who was dangerous yet tender, commanding yet careful. She traced the outline of the bracelet he'd given her, the tiny star catching the light. And deep down she knew one terrifying, thrilling truth. She was falling for a man who could destroy her existence in an instant, and she didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. And just like that, Zara's lonely night transformed into a shock she never anticipated. A Mercedes, a mysterious man, and a life she never imagined. But is this the beginning of true love or something far more dangerous? If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, beautiful people. Discover what happens in episode 2. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.